Hey everyone, it's Kristen, and if you're new to this channel, the last name is Van Valkenburg. I know, it's the longest name in the world, but welcome! I have so been looking forward to this day, which is the beginning of a color collaboration with the lovely and talented Miss Tiffany from Southern Gals Designs. Now, our collab is called Bite My Palette. I know that sounds silly, but essentially what it means is that we'll be creating materials to send to the other in our favorite color palettes or color stories. So for today, I will be creating several things, both textured and shimmery and shiny and not, in my preferred color palette. I will then send those materials to Tiffany. She will do the same, and she will open them on air and start to create with them. So we'll be doing an art journaling multi-week color collaboration starting right now. We'll be making painted papers, and I'll even be making the easiest, or maybe I should call it the laziest, art journal you've ever seen. So that's what's going down. Thank you, Tiffany, for playing with me, and thank you guys for coming along. Hey, it's VoiceOver Kristen here, and as we begin working on our painted papers, starting with this gorgeous color shift paint on one, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the paper itself. When I'm creating painted papers, I'm just using regular old copy paper or printer paper. What makes it sturdy is the addition of a generous amount of gesso, and I use white Liquitex gesso, on both the front and the back sides of the paper. Not only will this make it sturdy, but it will also prevent it from curling. I also tend to leave a little border, as you may be able to see, around the edges. This helps with the process. It gives a little place for you to put your fingers, and it just makes it easier. We'll end up trimming those edges out in the end. Now that we have a base for our first painted paper, we'll add more to that later. I'm pulling out the molding paste and some of my favorite stencils. I love the depth and dimension that you can get on painted papers when you start with the texture from molding paste and push it through a stencil. Now this one is a circle-y stencil. I'm sure that's not the technical name, but I will leave all of the supplies below. And I wanted to share with you here a little tip if, like me, you've made a mistake. We have a little bit of a molding spillage situation. All that is required to fix that is to take a damp sponge or a damp brush in this case and wipe away the molding paste before it dries. So we're going to go forward and I'll show you some of my favorite stencils, my tried and true wood stencil. I love this one. We're going to then go on to this capsule stencil and then another favorite of mine, which is a map of Amsterdam. That's this stencil. So we're applying that molding paste, pushing it through the stencil, and then we will set it aside to dry thoroughly. Next up, we're pulling out my favorite color. My favorite acrylic paint is this golden teal. I only use it for special occasions. Tiffany, you are absolutely a special occasion, so I'm going to cover the entire paper. This one will be very crumply and cool in the end. But for now, our color shift paint has dried, and I've decided to cover the entire page with Crackle Paint. I've never done this technique before. I know that Tiffany loves to use Crackle Paint in her work, and I thought, how cool could it be, if it works, how cool could it be to have an entire page of Crackle Paint, but within the cracks, you see that shimmer. I'm applying a thick coat. The thicker the coat, the thicker the cracks, so that's what I'm going for. Now we'll allow this to dry, and you do want it to dry naturally. It does help with the look of the cracks in the end. We'll talk about something else I allowed to dry overnight. I applied a thick coat, very thick with a palette knife, of Golden's Glass Bead Gel and allowed that to dry thoroughly. Now it is, and we get to play with it. So I'm pulling out some of my very favorite things, and they are the Brea Reese watercolor inks. There's watercolor inks, there's glittering watercolor inks, and there's liquid glitter, which is my desert island item. Have to have liquid glitter. So that's what I'm starting to play with. Now it becomes fun and free. You're allowing the colors to blend together. You're noticing here that I'm using a variety of similar colors so that in the end we'll have something that looks solid from afar, but there's actually a lot of depth and texture within it it as you see it dried and up close. So that's what we're doing. We're pulling out these watercolor inks, playing with some glittery shimmers, and I think you'll see when it's dried how textured all of these elements together end up making the paper. Good news, I've been patient and all of our molding paste has dried. So now we get to start working on those papers. And as you can see, I'm using the same watercolor ink from Brea Reese. I love this color combination, which is the ever so popular blue and green. Can't really go wrong with that one, but I find that I like working with colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So that way when they blend and bleed into each other, they're not going to turn brown. They're not going to be mad at each other. They're just going to create new colors of their own. So I'm adding blues and greens here or there, and then I will add water to the entire paper and start to kind of move and swirl the ink around. Again, creating a really soft color palette and paper in the end. Now, as we work on this next page, I wonder if you can pick out my big mistake, because I made one. Right there it is. Can you tell what I might have done? Well, as you can see, the last color I applied is not blending like the others. The reason why is I accidentally used alcohol ink instead of exclusively using watercolor inks. So I wasn't happy, it wasn't blending, and I thought, well, I'm going to go forward with creating this paper. I can always cut it up in the end and use it in a different way if I don't love the results. But instead, it kind of gave me a camo vibe, and I thought, all right, well, let's not fight it. Instead of trying to rework that, let's add more to it. So that's what we did in the end. We've got alcohol ink on this one, a camo vibe, and I don't know, we'll see what it looks like when it dries. Meantime, our teal is dried, and I know, I'm crumpling it all up. But don't worry, there's a good reason. It's going to be textured. And you see I ripped it a little bit. It's all right. I'll keep crumpling it up, and then I'll add a little piece of tape to the back of it in the end. But what I'm looking for are all of those ridges, all of those nooks and crannies that you get when you crumple paper up. And I have to say, this particular painted paper ends up becoming my favorite in the end. So once you've crumpled it and you've got all of those ridges, we're going to take a color shift paint in the same color. So this paper will have a monochromatic look to it. And we're going to hit with a palette knife all of those top surfaces. It won't go into all the nooks and crannies. It's just going to be carefully applied to the tops of the hills so that, as you can see, we're getting a really, really textured look and vibe to this paper. There's going to be one more element to it in the end, but I love the way this one turns out. Here's our wood grain stencil. We'll be using the Amsterdam map stencil next. And for both of these, I'll be adding color with Jane Davenport's watercolors. Now, this is the bright set. It is by far my favorite. Of course, the colors are very vibrant, but there's also a good variety within this little set. So I love pulling it out and working with it. As before, we're going to use colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So if they're next to each other on the color wheel, they're going to go next to each other on my piece of paper. We'll add quite a lot of color. I'll then add some water to it as we did before and allow the colors to blend into each other with the water. Then we'll go on to the Amsterdam map stencil, and to that I'm going to add a little bit of metallic watercolors as well. Just, you know, switch it up a bit. Okay, our papers are painted up, and now for some final touches. For me, that usually includes a little bit of liquid glitter. In this case, the liquid glitter is going to go into the nooks and crannies of this paper, making it incredibly dimensional. I love liquid glitter. Not only does it give you all of this shimmer and shine and iridescence, but it does it without any of the mess of traditional glitter. So that's why I'm such a liquid glitter fan. And when you see the pages dried and ready to go at the end, I think you'll be able to pick out where that shimmer and shine really are. Well, here's the Troublemaker. But in the end, I kind of liked it. I liked how the alcohol inks worked with the watercolor inks, and the way that they didn't blend kind of created a camo effect. I don't know, what do you think? We'll add just a little bit of iridescent yellow shimmer to the top, and Tiffany can choose to use it or not. And now, in addition to the painted papers, let's create some handmade confetti for Tiffany as well. It's as easy as it can be. Here you'll see I have a variety of circle punches, and I'm simply using old painted papers that I've created in the past, some new painted papers that we created here together today, and I'm just punching holes. You can use anything really, and it's a great way to add a little interest, a little something different, a little detail to any of your future journal pages or really mixed media projects. And now for the laziest art journal ever. I'm simply taking 2 pieces of good quality paper and some wax linen thread. But it's the materials that make the difference. I have 2 pages of equal length and width. This happens to be 11 by 7.5, but it doesn't matter. You just need the right paper and wax linen thread. So you ready? This is Fabriano Artistico 140 pound 100% cotton cold pressed watercolor paper. Okay, that was a lot. But really, with that paper, you can create so many easy journals. As you can see, I'm taking the wax linen thread into the first hole that I previously punched and out through the center. And an even easier, lazier way to figure out exactly what should go where, you simply then rethread it and pull that same string through the center. With that, you have an equal thread and you tie it tight and cut it off. There you go, your easiest journal ever. And there we have it. I will be sending this book along with several painted papers and that handmade confetti to Tiffany, as well as some sneaky little surprises that I haven't put in this video. You'll have to wait until next Monday to see Tiffany open it and see what she does with all of these painted papers in my preferred palette. Of course, I'll be doing the same. I cannot wait to see what Tiffany sent me. I love all of her glamorous grunge, and I can't wait to play with it. So that is next week, where we continue to bite our palette. Thanks for coming along. I look forward to seeing you then.